lines composed a few miles above, it's a long title, lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey on revisiting the banks of the Wye during a tour, July 13, 1798. That's the title, but we remember this as the Tintern Abbey or Tintern Abbey lines. That is how we remember the poem, Tintern Abbey or Tintern Abbey lines. So that's all, though this is the original title. Tintern Abbey, this is a picture of Tintern Abbey. Ruins. Tintern Abbey used to be an abbey. Abbey means a monastery, a big church kind of place. So this, you can see how big it is. You can see people standing here. So it's a big thing. It is in, this is a painting by J.M.W. Turner, British poet, around the same time as Shakespeare meeting Coleridge, etc. This is a painting of, you can still find these ruins in England, in Wales, Tintern Abbey. This poem is not really about this abbey. So you see that it is composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey. So Tintern Abbey is in a valley where this river named Wye flows. So Wordsworth and Dorothy had been on a walking tour through this valley. They visited the Tintern Abbey and then they climbed up to a higher place. And it is from that point, Wordsworth is looking at the Wye Valley. Wye Valley means a valley through which the river Wye flows. And he looks at the natural objects, the river, the trees, etc. And he writes this poem. It was composed in 1798. 5 years ago, in 1793, Wordsworth had visited the same place. So this is a revisiting. That is why he said revisiting the banks of the Wye. Wye is the name of a river. And remember, this is in Wales, in the United Kingdom, in Wales. Okay, that is Tintern Abbey. And before we start the poem, a couple of things about Wordsworth. We always say that Wordsworth is a nature poet. And he is, we use very high terms about him, saying he's the high priest of nature, etc. And that is all true. So the attitude towards nature is an important aspect of romantic poetry. It is not a very innocent or peripheral kind of love for nature. It is not that. The attitude of the romantics towards nature is a complex one. So for the as MA students, don't go about saying go about thinking that Wordsworth was a poet who wrote about flowers and birds and things like that. Though he has written about daffodils and about the cuckoo bird, etc., it is a much more deeper and complex thing. Wordsworth, when he was young, as I said, his mother died, and a few years later, his father also passed away. His father lost his way one evening on a winter evening, and he wandered in the wilderness through the night, and in a few days he died of exposure. So the close association with nature is not always a pleasant thing. And during Wordsworth's own tour in the Alps mountain, he also had very close and very near death encounters with nature. So it is not just the beauty of nature that Wordsworth talks about. He also talks about the grandeur, the awe, A-W-E. Awe is the feeling that repeatedly comes up. It is not a simple admiration. Awe is something you feel towards a very high force. When you are in the presence of God, you feel awe, A-W-E. So that is the kind of feeling that often Wordsworth has when he talks about natural objects. When he was a boy, there was an experience that he shares in Prelude. That extract is often prescribed for study. It is called the Stolen Boat, where Wordsworth says how when he was a boy, he took a boat without the owner's permission and went paddling in the river. And he feels how a cliff suddenly arose before him and he was frightened. It was as if nature or natural objects were telling him, scolding him for stealing the boat. So that is a awesome experience, an experience that fills him with awe. That takes us to the word sublime. Sublime is another aspect of the romantic poetry. They talk about the sublime. Sublime is very, very, what shall we say, filled with awe and filled with a kind of splendor, a huge, helpless condition of the human being against the immense magnitude of nature. So uh, it's that kind of a juxtaposition. Human beings as weak and vulnerable, fragile creatures set against the vast immensity of nature. And the awe you feel at that point is better explained by the word sublime, romantic sublime. Yes, yeah, it involves a kind of uh, wholeness. This is, even though Wordsworth was a Christian, uh, the experience he talks about is much more holistic. It is not limited by any religion. He is often said to have been a pantheist. A pantheist is a person who tried to see the presence of a superior being, which we call God, everywhere. God's the omnipresence of uh, a force, which is often related to the movement called transcendentalism in Europe at that time. Immanuel Kant and his transcendentalism was partly something that influenced Wordsworth and other romantics. And to Wordsworth, his relation, how the impact of nature to him is, there's a word we need to talk about that. It is not, the beauty or grandeur or splendor or melody or colors or whatever of nature was not a source of immediate happiness only. To Wordsworth, the natural objects, the experience he had with nature is something more durable. So he feels immediate happiness, but he also takes back that happiness with him. And even months or years later, in when he is in what shall we say, in unhappy circumstances, the memories give him strength, and the memories revive in him the kind of happiness he experienced when he actually saw the natural objects. Okay, now we'll come to the poem Tintern Abbey Lines. Tintern Abbey Lines was composed in 1798, as I told you, the same year as the publication of Lyrical Ballads. So this poem was added as a last piece in that collection of poems. So remember, this is about revisiting the banks of the Wye River. 5 years ago, he was there, and now he has returned. Okay. So I'll read the poem, and line by line, we will look at it. 5 years have passed, 5 summers, with the length of 5 long winters. So 5 summers have passed, and 5 long winters have also passed. Winters are long because in England, winters can be very cold, and you will find the time to move very slowly because there isn't much you can do. You are often forced to live inside, particularly in Wordsworth's time. People would mostly spend the time inside their homes. So winter will pass very, very slowly. That's why winters are long. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. These waters, the waters of the river Wye. Soft inland murmur. Wordsworth himself explains that the inland murmur because the river at that point is not much troubled by the tides that come in further down. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs. Behold means see. See, behold is an old word, archaic word, meaning see. Behold her means see her. That is how Wordsworth's Solitary Reaper begins. Behold her single in the field, yon solitary highland lass. So behold means see. Past tense is beheld. So once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs. So he's watching once again the cliffs on the sides of the river Wye, not far from the Tintern Abbey. That on a wild, secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion. So it's a lonely place and very mysterious place, full of this awe, as I said, and it creates in you a feeling of seclusion. And Wordsworth, being a poet who loved seclusion, is happy about it. And connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. So here there is the quietness of the landscape is reflected by the quietness of the sky. The month is July. July is summer in England, summer month. So maybe it is rather pleasant. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue and lose themselves amid groves and copses. The day is come when I again repose, means I have come back again to repose or to relax under this dark sycamore tree. Sycamore is a tree. So here's a sycamore tree near which maybe he took some rest 5 years back. He has returned to the same spot and he is reposing there. Repose means to relax, to sit. And sitting, you must imagine that this is a high place. And from that spot, the poet can look down at the valley. He can look at a large area from that point. View these plots of cottage ground. So from there, when he looks, he can see cottages where people live. But these cottages are not very visible because they are covered by the trees, because he's looking from a height. So he can see the ground, cottage ground, orchard tufts. So from looking from a distance, orchards looks like little tufts. Tufts is a little clump. Orchard is fruit trees. Maybe we are talking about apples, peaches, pears, nectarines, apricots, plums, prunes, etc. These are the fruits that often grows in the English countryside, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue. This is a time when all these fruits are unripe. Apples will be green to look at. Pears will be green to look at. Peaches will be green. So the same color as the leaf. So these fruits are not visible. So when you look from a distance, the trees, we see only green color. The trees with the leaves and the fruits are all one same color because it is summer. July. By August, by September, the fruits will begin to ripen and the leaves will begin to ripen too. So the color will totally change. So this is an experience you will have only when you live in cold countries like England you can observe in cold places. You can see that in Himachal Pradesh in India. We can, yeah, Tibet, in China, etc. You can watch this kind of season changes. Anyway, here it is summer and it is green everywhere. So I'll read that part again. Here under this dark sycamore, and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue and lose themselves amid groves and copses. Groves and copses are again clumps of trees. So why does he talk about I again here once again? Because it is a revisiting. He visited once in 1793. Now he is visiting in 1798. This poem is for detailed study, yes. Once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild. These pastoral farms green to the very door, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees. We must keep in mind that Romantic poetry was also a poetry of revolt, and that can be seen more in poets like Shelley and Byron. Poems that you could see that in William Blake too, where he writes about the chimney sweep, the very miserable conditions brought in through industrialization, through what is called the enclosure movement. At the time of William Shakespeare and even after that, the whole countryside was not separated by fences. Feudalism was there, and large piece of land was owned by a single person. But later on, in 18th century, in 19th century, there was widespread enclosure happening. Hedges were being constructed, separating the pasture land into different pieces. And land was owned, small portions were owned by people, and enclosures were set up. This led to many people losing their accommodation. When rich people put fences and separated the land, the tenants who once lived there and grazed their cattle there lost their lands, and they all migrated to Liverpool, to Manchester, to London, etc., and slums were formed. A lot of unpleasant things were happening at this time, and in the decades before Tintern Abbey and the decades after Tintern Abbey, industrialization and a lot of bitterness was happening in England. So here also signs of those things are visible, but Wordsworth is trying not to see them. So that is why we call him a romantic poet. He's as opposed to a realist poet who would have talked about the raw realities. Wordsworth is trying to cover up the reality and escape from reality. So here, hedgerows are these hedges that I talked to you about, which separated the lands, which was an unhappy thing in those days. Later, people got used to it. So these hedges, to Wordsworth, looking from above like a god, seems just like little lines of sportive wood run wild. So that line is very important. It talks about a very current issue in England, but Wordsworth is covering it up, making it mild. He says, I'll read that again. Once again, I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild. These pastoral farms. Pastoral farms are farms where the cattle, sheep, etc. are reared. Green to the very door. So he is talking about the enchanting greenness. Wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees. Where do these wreaths of smoke come up? Wreaths are small circular formation. Where do these smoke come from? They come from the cottages, which are hidden by the trees. But Wordsworth, in these cottages, people live. maybe not very rich people. We do not know. But Wordsworth is trying not to talk about life there. He is trying not to think about the place as being occupied by people. See how he is talking about that. He's trying to imagine, cover up the whole thing with a kind of strange aura of fantasy. I'll read that part. With some uncertain notice as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave where by his fire the hermit sits alone. He is trying to imagine that the wreaths of smoke are produced by vagrant dwellers. Vagrant dwellers means people who do not have houses, like gypsies who keep moving from place to place. He is trying to imagine that there are some vagrant people living in the woods. And he also imagines that perhaps there is a hermit living in a cave somewhere below, and the smoke comes up from before the cave. But actually, there are no vagrants, there are no hermits, there are actual human beings living there inside, scattered in cottages there. But Wordsworth, being a romantic poet, is trying to see the whole thing as a very glorious and rather mysterious thing. So that is the first stanza of Tintern Abbey line, where he gives a very splendid description of the site of the valley from a little distance above. Now we look at the next stanza. These beauteous forms. So all those things that were described in the former stanza, though through a long absence, have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye. But oft in lonely rooms and amid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them, in hours of weariness, sensations sweet, felt in the blood, felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind, with tranquil restoration, feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps, etc. Wordsworth, as I said, to Wordsworth, an experience of nature was happiness for that moment, but it was also happiness for future. I'll show you a few other lines here. Sorry. Yeah, look at this line. First stanza here. For oft, when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. This is from the poem Daffodils. So he saw daffodils, a lot of daffodils, and he came, but then he went back to his city. He was living in London. He was working in London. He went back to the city, which is not very beautiful, which is gray, dull, and there. But sometimes when he is resting in a pensive mood, in a thoughtful mood, these daffodils flash upon that inward eye. Inward eye is his memory. They flash upon they come flashing into his mind, and that is what makes his solitude happy. That is the bliss of solitude. So making happiness, creating happiness in his solitude. So that is this is a repeated idea in Wordsworth. So the daffodils which he saw is a pleasure immediately. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly dance. So that's a happiness. But that happiness continues. Months later or years later, when he is in a very unhappy mood, thoughtful mood, sometimes this vision of the daffodils will come back into his mind, filling it with happiness. And that is from daffodils. And now we have another 4 lines here. This is from another poem. His name is To the Cuckoo. He listens to the bird, he hears the bird song, and then he says, and I can listen to thee yet. Months later, I can listen to thee yet, can lie upon the plain and listen till I do beget that golden time again. So he relives the happiness of listening to the song much after he stops listening to it. So this is a repeated idea. I have 2 more lines from Solitary Reaper. He sees a girl singing in the field, and he is attracted by the song, but then he went away. That music in my heart I bore long after it was heard no more. So this woman, this girl, solitary reaper girl, is as much a part of nature as the cuckoo or the daffodils. And her song he bore in his mind long after it was heard no more. So that is a repeated idea in Wordsworth. And that is exactly what we are going to see here in Tintern Abbey lines. Also, these beauteous forms, he had seen the very same sycamore tree, the cottage ground, the tufts, etc., the fumes, the smoke coming up, etc., 5 years back, and they have remained in his mind. Through a long absence, have not been to me as is a landscape to a blind man's eye, but oft in lonely rooms. See, before, very, very similar to the line, oft when on my couch I lie in vacant antency. Say very similar. Oft when on my couch I lie. Here he says, oft in lonely rooms and amid the din of towns and cities. Din is noise. I have owed to them in hours of weariness. Owed to what? Owed to the scenes he had seen in Tintern Abbey area. In hours of weariness, sensations sweet, felt in the blood, felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. See, these are lines when asked for annotation or when you have to write about it or describe. Don't think you can have an exact explanation. You're not expected to give exact explanations to poetry. You do that only in science. In literature, we only can say this can suggest this or it could be that. There could be many, many possibilities. Whatever you say, remember, you will have to make it clear. Make it clear why you feel it is so. Okay. So here, look at these lines. I owe to the scenes of the Wye Valley in hours of weariness sweet sensations that I felt in the blood and felt along the heart. It is not literally blood or heart. He is trying to express the intensity of his feeling through these lines, telling us, I felt it in the blood, felt along the heart, is Wordsworth's way of telling you or telling us that those scenes remain in his mind and gave him happiness in hours of weariness. And these are very memorable lines amid the din of towns and cities. So, how was his sensation? The sensation was felt in the blood, felt along the heart. It passed even into my purer mind. So, maybe purer mind is a deeper aspect of his mind consciousness with tranquil restoration. This tranquil restoration could have many implications. The scenes of nature restored in this tranquility of his mind, emotions recollected in tranquility, exactly the same thing. They are restored or recollected, brought back when he is in a tranquil mood. That is that's a very evident interpretation. It also suggests that his mind was restored. Tranquility was restored in his mind because of these memories. That is also a possible suggestion. Remember that good poetry, uh, in the hands of skilled craftsmen, poems suggest a lot of things. So you cannot go and say this is what he means. You can only say this is what he seems to suggest. So here, Wordsworth is saying that in my tranquil mood, I restored the sight, or my mind brought back to me the beautiful scenes that I have seen once. And in turn, they restored tranquility in my mind. So that's a complex way in which it works. And something else also was brought to the mind, feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on the best portion of a good man's life, his little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. Wordsworth is saying the scenes I have, the experience of nature that I have had, have such a strong influence on me, impact on me, that they have a benign effect. They impel me, and they are expressed indirectly through the little acts of kindness that we do. So he's talking about the benign impact of nature and natural objects on human beings, particularly his own self. He's talking that, see, I do things, like little unremembered acts of kindness and of love. My mind is filled with a feeling of goodness, a charity, a benignness by the memory of all these beautiful scenes I have seen before. Nor less I trust to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime, that blessed mood, in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. So, more than restoring tranquility, more than creating a benignness in the mind, nature and natural objects have a greater contribution to make. That's what he talks here. I may have owed another gift. It has given me another gift. What is that? Another gift of aspect more sublime. That is what I was trying to explain a little while ago. Sublime, the human beings put against the vast immensity of nature. That kind of vastness, the awe-inspiring aspect of nature is brought in here. That blessed, something similar to a spiritual experience. This is very similar to a spiritual experience. Just the kind of thing that praying gives you, just the kind of thing that reading a spiritual book gives you. It gives you a deeper sense. It creates in you the blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, the unforeseeable aspects of life, all the things in life that hurt you, all the things in life that you do not understand, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is a painful thing. Wordsworth has experienced that a lot. Even as a child, we have seen that. And this unintelligible world, the logic of which you will never understand, will become light. See, that is what happens to us when we go to the temple, or when we go to the church, or when we chant, or when we pray or do puja or whatever. When we try to get in touch with God, what happens is your mind gets lighter when you surrender yourself totally to a greater force, which we call God. Your mind is filled with peace because you have surrendered everything, and you stop trying to understand. You stop trying to fight, but you leave everything to the supreme power. That is what Wordsworth talks about here. This is a pantheistic experience, a kind of spirituality where you submit yourself to the greater amorphous entity called nature. This is very important. These lines are, no less I trust to, I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime. So more than just giving peace, giving happiness, it creates a blessed mood in which the mystery, the heaviness, or the weary weight of the unintelligible world is lightened. And that serene and blessed mood in which the affections gently lead us on, until the breath of this corporeal frame, and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. Here he talks about a truly spiritual experience where your external body goes into a trance-like stage, and you experience this tranquility in your soul. Just like when you are meditating, you experience God, or you experience a supreme kind of calm in your mind. Wordsworth talks about a calm that comes into his mind when he, in the solitude of his room, he thinks of the natural beauty that he has witnessed once. That is another benign impact that nature has on him. Your body is laid asleep, and you become a living soul, a very transcendental spiritual experience, while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. You have a supernatural vision of reality. You have a sublime and very spiritual kind of approach to life, and your mind becomes extremely calm. When you have that ultimate vision of the divine plan in which you have no particular role to play. You only have to submit yourself totally, and then you become totally calm in your mind. So this stanza is very important because it gives you it summarizes Wordsworth's experience with nature in a very dense manner. So this is Wordsworth goes on talking about it much later in his Ode on Intimations of Immortality and many other poems. Wordsworth talks about it. It is exactly the same. So if you have read these lines, you have got the idea of Wordsworth's relationship with nature. Wordsworth's multifaceted relationship with nature is made very clear in this passage. If this be but a vain belief. So he talks about this, and then now he says, if whatever I have said so far are only my thoughts. So let us imagine that they are only my thoughts, my beliefs. Vain means fruitless beliefs. Yet, oh, how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless daylight, when the fretful stir unprofitable and the fever of the world have hung upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit have I turned to thee, O sylvan why, thou wanderer through the woods, how often has my spirit turned to thee. He's again from that transcendental experience, he comes back to a very simpler kind of thing. He says that there were many moments of unhappiness in my life when my heart became lighter, I became happy when I thought about you, O river Wye. Sylvan Wye is a river surrounded by green, beautiful woods. Sylvan is a reference to this woodland. Sylvan means green, verdant. If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how often, oft is often, how oft, in darkness and amid darkness is not external darkness, but darkness of the mind. Many shapes of joyless daylight, when the fretful stir unprofitable and the fever of the world, though the fretful stir unprofitable and fever of the world refers to the difficulties that he experienced in life while going through his everyday occupation. uh, Maybe pains caused by the French Revolution and the sad turn it took in Europe. Wordsworth initially admired and glorified the French Revolution. He was inspired by the French Revolution. And he said, bliss was it to be alive and on that dawn, and to be young was very heaven. That was his attitude. But what happened later was French Revolution took a bloody turn. It French Revolution is often called the mother that ate her own children. Some brutality was unleashed. Innocent people were, butchered. They were guillotined by the dozen every day. And that is called the bloody face of French Revolution, the very violent developments that happened after the French Revolution. And Wordsworth was very upset by that. That is one thing. And he was upset about his own issues. The woman he loved was in France. He could not marry her, and his child is there. All those things, and the guilt feeling, and many other things might be involved in the fretful, stir, unprofitable, and the fever of the world. And these lines are reminiscent of some lines in Shakespeare, but you might remember that uh, day, last Sunday, if I remember right, we studied Hamlet, or was it last Thursday? Anyway, when we did Hamlet, we talked about how weary, stale, and unprofitable are to me the uses of this world. Hamlet's soliloquy. how weary, stale, and unprofitable. One, maybe those lines inspired Wordsworth. And also in Macbeth, there's a line saying, "After life's fitful fever, he sleeps well." This is about King Duncan, who has been murdered by Macbeth. The line is, "After life's fitful fever, he sleeps well." So this line, "when the fretful stir unprofitable in the fever of the world," seem to have intertextual relationship with Wordsworth, Shakespeare's Hamlet and um, Macbeth. And it also reminds me of a poem that will be written some 30 years after, 30 or 40 years after, or a little more than that, by Matthew Arnold in his Scholar Gypsy, where he says, "Born in the days when wits were fresh and clear, and life ran smooth like the sparkling Thames. The strange disease of modern life, its sick hurry, its divided aims." Anyway, uh, here in this stanza, Wordsworth is saying that I have the simple happiness of this vision of Sylvan White coming back and comforting me in the times of sadness in the city. How often has my spirit turned to thee? And now, with gleams of half extinguished thought, with many recognitions dim and faint, and somewhat of a sad perplexity, the picture of the mind revives again. While here I stand, not only with a sense of present pleasure, but with pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years. Now he is coming back to the present. He is coming back. In the last two stanzas, we saw Wordsworth reflecting on how it was between the last time he came to the Wye Valley and the present visit. Now he is coming back to the present and says, "Now with gleams of half extinguished thought, with many recognitions dim and faint, and somewhat a sad perplexity." Perplexity means confusion in the mind. The picture of the mind revives again. While here I stand, not only with a sense of present pleasure. So I know that today I am looking down at this beautiful valley with little wreaths of smoke coming up, and the fruits which are not seen because of the green color, etc., etc., are not only a source of present pleasure, but I know that in this moment there is life and food for future years, because it is like a battery that is charged. I am now fully charged, I am being charged, and this will sustain me for years to come, future years. So that's something that Wordsworth talks about. Well, this is not a very new thing. We all have this experience. Every human beings have this experience of recollecting happy moments and feeling comforted. But Wordsworth has kind of developed that to a higher level. And so I dare to hope, though changed no doubt from what I was when first I came upon these hills, when like a roe I bounded over the mountains by the sides of the deep rivers. Now, we are coming to another important point. This again repeats in some of Wordsworth's poems. He talks about how his attitude towards nature, how his relationship with nature has changed over time. How was nature to him when he was a boy? How was it nature to him when he was a younger man? How is it to him now? At this moment, when Wordsworth writes these lines, he is something like 29 years old, and which, given the standards of those days, would not be a very young age, because Keats, as we know, wrote all his poems and died when he was only 24. So it's not like today at 24, people would still be studying in a college, depending on their parents and asking their parents advice about whether to go out in the evening or not. But in those days, life expectancy was short, and people were productive much more than they are today, perhaps. Well, here Wordsworth is talking about a mature here Wordsworth is only 29, but he is talking as if he is a very mature person. And he talks about how his attitude towards nature has changed over time. Now, let me read that, you'll understand. For nature, then, when I came last time, 5 years ago, I was already a man then. He was 23 at that time. The coarser pleasures of my boyish days and their glad animal movements all gone by. So already his one level of relationship with nature had ended. As a boy, he was filled with animal pleasures, animal movements. He was more like a bird or a squirrel or a deer in the woods. More a sensuous kind of happiness that he had at that time. His relationship with nature was like a playmate. But when he visited Y 5 years ago, that stage had already gone. For nature then to me was all in all. That is how you should read. For nature then to me was all in all. In between, he says, because the coarser pleasures of my days, boyish days, had all already gone. And when I came to the Y Valley last time, 5 years back, nature was already to me all in all. I cannot paint what then I was. So, but then he was a younger person, 5 years younger, and he saw nature like a lover. That is what he is going to explain now. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. Cataract is a waterfall. Cataract is a waterfall. So you have a disease named cataract because when you see, it is as if something is preventing your vision, as if as if you are looking through a waterfall. That is why the disease is called cataract. The thickening of the lens inside your eye leads to a condition. Your lens will have to be removed and replaced with a artificial lens, and you will get vision back. Cataract is a disease, timirum, that people get mostly when they are in their late 50s or after that. So that is it. But cataract literally means a waterfall. The sounding cataract haunted me like a passion. Haunted means constantly remained with me like a passion. Haunt, the word haunt literally means to have the presence of ghosts. So if you are haunted, the ghost is always with you. If there is a haunted house, the ghost is always in the house. Here, the sounding cataract, the sound and the scene of the cataract, the waterfall, would remain with me constantly like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, the deep and gloomy wood, their colors and their forms were then to me an appetite, a feeling, and a love that had no need of a remoter charm by thought supplied, nor any interest unborrowed from the eye. The experience of nature that Wordsworth had in 1793 when he was 23 years old and he was in the Y Valley for the first time was like a more of a sensual thing. Even though the childhood experience was more animal like, here he was experiencing nature as if nature were his lover. It is like a love relationship. The sounding cataract haunts him like a passion. The tall rock, the mountain, the deep and gloomy wood, their colors, their forms were to him an appetite. See, it's an appetite is a physical thing. It's a hunger kind of thing, a desire kind of thing, which you feel when you are in love. A feeling and a love that had no need of a remoter charm. It did not need anything else that is supplied by a higher aspect of your intellect, or a spiritual aspect was not there at that time. That's what he's trying to say. No need of a remoter charm by thought supplied, nor any interest unborrowed from the eye. Unborrowed from the eye means totally visual, totally of the senses. I was interested. What fascinated me at that point was a totally sensuous kind of thing related to the senses. that time is past. So that was, again, he talks about two stages: the animal stage of his boyhood, and then 5 years back of early youth, and now a mature young man. That time is past, with all its aching joys are now no more, and all its dizzy raptures. Aching joys and dizzy raptures again are things associated with romantic love. When you are in love, when you're in romantic love, you feel all these things. You burn and freeze at the same time. So those aching joys and dizzy raptures are all gone. Not for this faint eye. But I'm not unhappy because of that. I no longer experience the dizzy raptures and aching joys when I watch the woods. But I have no complaints, nor for this faint eye, nor mourn or murmur, because other gifts have followed. So if those have gone, other things have come. For such loss, I would believe abundant recompense. So he's saying, even though that lover like feeling is gone, I have something else now that has occupied its place. For I have learned to look on nature, not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. Now in nature, he finds something else. He finds nature to have a chastening power. Chastening is purifying or correcting. Now nature is more like, what shall we say, giving a source of spiritual calmness. I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity. The, he is now mature enough to see the real world with more calm of mind, the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh nor grating. It's not very harsh, it is not grating, but it has the power, it has ample power, sufficient power to chasten and subdue. So, to repeat what I said before, spirituality, when you surrender yourself to God, that spiritual feeling will control you, that will purify you, that will totally control you, that will take charge over your life. Ample power to chasten. Chasten is to correct, to punish and correct. Subdue is to totally control. So now, at this point of time, nature has that kind of a chastening effect on me. It is now more like a godly figure. It totally uh, gives me calmness in my mind. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply indiffused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man. This is transcendentalism. This is pantheism, something that is above the ephemeral life. It is permeating all natural objects, including the mind of man. It is a force that flows through all these things, emotion and the spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things, all pervading kind of spirit. Therefore am I still a lover of the meadows and the woods and mountains, and of all that we behold from this green earth, and all the mighty world of eye and ear, both what they half create and what perceive, well pleased to recognize in nature, and the language of the sense, the anchor of my purest thoughts, the nurse, the guide, the guardian of my heart and soul, and all my moral being. So that is the final stage in his relation with nature, where um, it is, though he still remains a lover of the meadows and the woods and the mountains, it is a stronger thing that totally controls his mind. It makes his thoughts pure. It nurses him. It guides him. It guards his soul and gives calm to his life and keeps him morally intact. It gives him ethical values. It's just like a religion, just like a spiritual experience that you have. His encounter with nature. And another bit of information about the Tintern Abbey, you saw the ruins in the beginning. Tintern Abbey is one of those abbeys which were destroyed during Henry VIII. I think I did tell you how during Henry VIII's time, English Reformation took place. The break with the Catholic Church took place, and Henry VIII declared himself to be the head of the church, and he had a lot of monasteries dissolved, and the wealth was all taken away from the monasteries. Same thing happened to Tintern Abbey, and it has been in ruins since then. What they did to all these monasteries was that they would sell all the parts that could be reused. Only the rock structure will remain. Even the rock structure, people might dismantle and take away. So that is why there are many ruined churches in England. So all the aftermath of the English Reformation. Wordsworth explained his relationship, the impact nature had on him, how the scene of the Sylvan Way is going to continue to be an inspiration for him, etc. Actually, the poem is over. Now he makes an address to his sister. Let us read that through. Nor, perchance, if I were not thus taught, should I the more suffer my genial spirits to decay. For thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river. Which river is it? River Wye. Thou, my dearest friend, my dear friend, and in thy voice I catch the language of my former heart, and read my former pleasures in the shooting lights of thy wild eyes. So this is an assertion of friendliness and friendship to Dorothy. That is what the last section does. It asserts that, Wordsworth asserts that Dorothy means a lot to him. Dorothy is important to him, what she signifies to him, etc. And he also expresses the belief that even if he vanishes from the earth, she continues to have happiness and the same kind of response to nature as he had. For thou art with me here upon the banks of this fair river, thou my dearest friend. Oh, yet a little while may I behold in thee what I was once, my dear sister. And this prayer I make, knowing that nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Well, this is a oft quoted line. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. Well, this is basically just a romantic statement. It should not be taken literally. It should be understood that if you are willing to have a right attitude towards life, you will be happy. That is basically what he is trying to say. I think it is an ode on melancholy and ode by Coleridge, that Coleridge talks about nature gives back what you give it. You get what you give. If you give gloominess to nature, she will reflect gloominess back to you. These lines are along those lines. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. So it is not to be read as a kind of love of nature in a simple manner. He is talking about a little more complex thing where he says that happiness is something you have to find within you. That's the central idea there. It's her privilege through all the years of this our life to lead from joy to joy. For she can so inform the mind that is within us, so impress with quietness and beauty, and so feed with lofty thoughts, that neither evil tongues, rash judgments, nor the sneers of selfish men. Probably all these references, civil, evil tongue, rash judgment, sneers of selfish men, were all experiences that Wordsworth and Coleridge were going through in their life. So he's talking about the unhappinesses, the difficulties of reality that is life. Nor greetings where no kindness is, nor all the dreary intercourse of daily life shall ever prevail against us or disturb our cheerful faith, that all which we behold is full of blessings. He says, however harsh life is to us, if we have this kind of attitude towards nature and natural objects, we will remain blessed in our life. Rash judgment, sneers of selfish men, nor greetings with no kindness, where greetings are response from people without kindness. That means the unkind treatment of your fellow being, or the dreary intercourse of daily life. This word intercourse today almost has the same meaning as sexual intercourse, but it really used to mean interaction, everyday things that you do in your life. That is, but today in 21st century, the word intercourse is used only in relation to sexual intercourse. But Wordsworth says the everyday happenings of your life. That's the meaning here. We don't use it in that sense anymore. That is how words come to change, uh, their meaning. Nor all the dreary intercourse of everyday life. No greetings with kindness. All these things that happen, the dreary routine of life shall ever prevail against us, will not affect us. That's the meaning. The ever prevail against us means will not affect us or disturb our cheerful faith, that all which we behold is full of blessings. So that means even though you cannot change the physical realities of life, you cannot change the way people treat you. If you have the attitude, the right attitude, if you have the right outlook, you can draw happiness from nature and be able to survive all these negative aspects of life. Therefore, let the moon shine on thee. Now, this is a kind of prayer for his sister. Let the moon shine on thee in thy solitary walk, and let the misty mountain winds be free to blow against thee. And in after years, when these wild ecstasies shall be matured into a sober pleasure, when thy mind shall be a mansion for all lovely forms, thy memory be as a dwelling place for all sweet sounds and harmonies. O then, if solitude or fear or pain or grief should be thy portion, with what healing thoughts of tender joy wilt thou remember me, and these my exhortations. Well, here what he means is you let your life be happy, let your life be filled with so many good things. But if a time comes in your life when there is solitude, that means if I die and you become alone, or fear or pain or grief should be your fate, your portion, then these words will be a comfort to you. What healing thoughts of tender joy will thou remember me? These my exhortations. So he's kind of dedicating this poem to his sister. All those things he has written in this poem. He says, this poem will sustain you even if I go before you. Exhortations means, um, you know, the what shall we say, statements that are made. Nor perchance, if I should be where I no more can hear thy voice. Again, is referring to a possibility of death. In actuality, we know that he goes on to live for the next 50 years. Uh, yeah, if I should, I can, but still, I think he died before his sister did. I no more can hear thy voice, nor catch from thy wild eyes these gleams of past existence. Wilt thou then forget that on the banks of this delightful stream we stood together, that I, so long a worshipper of nature, hither came unwearied in that service, rather say with warmer love, or with far deeper zeal of holier love. So, in case I say bye to you at some point in life, you will remember how we experience nature this particular day on this particular point. Nor wilt thou then forget that after many wanderings, many years of absence, these steep woods and lofty cliffs, and this green pastoral landscape were to me more dear, both for themselves and for thy sake. Well, as I said at the beginning of this stanza is a bit artificial and it doesn't fit in with the rest. Here he is compromising this the spontaneity of his poetry so that he can bring in this little part about his sister. And he is kind of dedicating the poem to you. And you will remember that you will never forget that what these cliffs and woods mean to me. It means to us, to both of us. And it's for you and for me that we are having this experience. That is what he says here in the last part. But even if you leave out the whole of last part, this poem is important. And this poem contains most of the central arguments about creativity, about Wordsworth and his relation with poetry, etc. Yes, that is Tintern Abbey lines for you.